Protests have continued in Israel despite Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to postpone controversial reforms to the judicial system. In unprecedented events, the country's biggest trade union called a strike, and Israelis watched society close down around them on Monday. Mr. Netanyahu said the delay until the next session of parliament would enable dialogue and avoid civil war. Well, our Middle East correspondent Anna Foster is in Jerusalem for us. Anna, hello to you. Avoid civil war. Strong words from Benjamin Netanyahu, perhaps an indication of quite how worried he is by these protests. But the protests are continuing, aren't they?
They did. Last night on the streets, you had the demonstrators who have been out for 12 weeks or so now at regular intervals protesting against these judicial reforms. But also last night, the right-wing element of the Israeli government called for their supporters to come onto the streets as well, because, of course, it's important to remember that there are people here in this country who back those judicial reforms as well. The reason that the government is even in a position to consider bringing them is that it won enough seats in the last election to put together a coalition to try and get that legislation through. So last night both groups were on the streets up and down the country. There were some isolated racist attacks. There were some clashes as well that happened in certain parts of the country. This has been really problematic for Benjamin Netanyahu. What he announced last night in terms of a delay was not what the people who are against this legislation want. They want it to be scrapped altogether. So while this takes the heat or some of the heat out of the situation for now, it is not the solution to this problem.
Yeah, and it's difficult to see, even if there were talks between the two sides who are so opposed, how they would make some sort of resolution. So do you think this is Prime Minister Netanyahu's way of perhaps introducing some change to those proposed reforms and keep those who want the reforms happy as well? Or is he just trying to buy some time?
Oh, that's a really good question. It could go either way. Certainly he needs to buy time, because that strike that started yesterday morning, that strike which saw everything from shops and banks to closed down to hospitals only treating emergency patients, to flights not leaving the main airport, that really brought things to a head. So that meant that he did need to try and buy some time, because the country was becoming paralysed in a way that over the last 12 weeks or so, the impact of these protests has been felt, but it hasn't shut the country down in quite the same way. I think when the talks begin, yes, concessions on both sides will have to be talked about. We heard last night as well that one of the far right elements of the government, Jewish Power, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the National Security Minister, have been promised the establishment of a new National Guard here in Israel, which would fall under his control. Now, that's something that's been talked about before, but the timing was really suggestive. The fact that we've got a delay, but we've also got one of the coalition partners being handed something that they had been pushing for. And I think that gives you a flavour of some of the negotiations, some of the horse trading really that's going to be happening over the next few weeks, because this legislation will reappear in the next parliamentary session. It's only been delayed for a short while, and all of these problems will start to pile up again.
Anna, thank you very much. Anna Foster in Jerusalem.